I have the methods on the left, cost is in the middle. So to me, it's like how hard or how much money does it, how hard / how much money does it take to kind of do any one of these methods? And then value on the right. Value is something I think people don't often think about when it comes to validation. Not all evidence is equal, right? Not everything you find out is going to be like as convincing as other things you do. Like as I have here, if you have actual usage, the value is very high, right? People are actually doing what your product is. If you're doing a user survey, it's pretty low. People are saying that they want to do this thing, but they haven't actually done it, and you haven't done it yet, right? Which, look, it's not like it's no value, but it's less value. So I think one thing that you want to keep in mind when you're thinking about validation methods is how much value am I getting out of this validation method, and how convincing is the evidence that I get back, and how much does it cost, right? Let me explain kind of like why I've ascribed these values to each of them. User surveys, they're just easy to do. I mean, you guys can all finish a user survey in the next 30 minutes before we get off of this call, right? So they're just incredibly easy to do, but they also have pretty low value because, again, people will say that they are going to do stuff and never end up actually doing it. I feel like my experience with entrepreneurship early on when I first started was honestly just an exercise in asking people what they would do, building that thing, and then finding out they did something completely different. So I just don't value the user surveys that much. I think they are a good initial step though. So like, just because they're so easy to do, I wouldn't completely throw it out. Like, there's value in doing it. You actually learn quite a lot by like hearing people's answers, but it's just not that important. But as an initial step, perfectly fine. You just need to have this caveat that like what they say and what they're going to do are like different things. So user surveys. Okay. User interviews. They're like a slightly better form of user surveys, but you can't get as many data points. So I don't know, that's kind of like a downside of it too. So it's slightly better, I think, at the end. User interviews cost more because they take more time. Like, you got to be able to get on a call with them or go meet them in person and go talk to them. It just takes more time and energy, but you get better resolution kind of information, right? So you get to actually like see them talk about it, see where the conversation goes. You get a higher resolution information back. You have the same problem with user interviews than user surveys though. And honestly, it's even worse in user interviews. People don't want to make you like, they don't want to say anything that upsets you, and they don't want to like make you feel bad or like sad. So oftentimes when I've done user interviews in the past, I just think I'm asking this person, hey, do you think this is like a good idea? Or like, okay, that's a terrible user interview question, but basically you're like, the people ask questions like this, and the person's always going to say yes. They want to be nice to you. You're like, you're sitting in front of them. Like, they're not going to tell you what they really think about an idea. And frankly, they're not thinking about it that hard. So I just find user interviews to kind of be like disingenuous a lot of times. I just always take them with a grain of salt. Again, they're qualitative and useful if you can kind of like pick out nuggets when you have conversations with people. But user interviews, like, they're not you can't say that you really validated an idea by doing user interviews. You can get information on where you might want to go, and like interesting areas that you want to figure out, but you can never get this. Maybe one good example of something I got out of user interviews when I was working on the blue collar staffing platform, and this was totally unexpected. I asked in my user interviews with the part-timers, I asked them all these set of questions, and they all answered the questions. It was fine. It was actually nothing that interesting. I would say 75% of them at the very end of the call would say this: just to confirm, I only work when I want to work, correct? And I said, yes. And they said, there's no minimum amount of work that I have to do in a given week, right? And I was like, correct. And they were like, and I get to choose where. And I said, correct. And that happened all the time. And then I started thinking, why do people keep asking that? Right? Like, of all the things they can ask about, why this set of questions? And so And then I started thinking, maybe that's the thing they care about most, that they get to choose where they work, they get to choose when they work, they get to do all that stuff. So then I went back to my fake door, which is I was buying paid ads, basically Facebook and Instagram ads to drive people to this website. Again, I'll teach you guys all how to do this, but I was buying Facebook and Instagram ads. And I changed the copy on my ad from make money, make extra money by working kind of fun places. I don't know, it was something kind of generic and kind of lame, to work when you want, work only when you want. And my cost per acquisition dropped by like, I think 50% or something like that, maybe 75%. Like it crushed my previous ad. And to me, that was like, oh, now I know what this business is about. That's the thing that matters to part-timers. It's like the reason why they want to work part-time. I mean, they could work part-time at a specific coffee shop, but all coffee shops and all jobs that they take, there's a minimum number of hours you have to work. And if you work at the coffee shop dictates hours. My platform is all about giving control to the part-timers. They only work when they want. So I changed all of my website copy. I changed all of my ads. I changed my welcome email. I changed everything to basically be about this. And I saw like metric increases across the board, because even though users were using it for this, I didn't know that that was the thing that was important to them. And so when I actually realized it and I changed the product around that, that's when the product really kind of like started to kind of like grow and take off. So I wouldn't have got that probably from a survey. That's only from like talking to users and doing kind of user interviews. So even though it's like, I wouldn't count it as like you validate an idea by doing user interviews, there's value to it. There's also a reason why YC always talks about like, you know, talk to users, right? That's their like number one piece of advice, is just like talk to users, because you sometimes will pick out these like nuggets of information and kind of observations when you talk to enough users. I probably talked to about 100, 150 people in that user interview when I was kind of doing that. Okay, sorry, side tangent on things that worked in the past. Okay, show mockups. Okay, I'm really sorry. I hate this one. I freaking hate it. I'm convinced that this is okay. Show mockups is a user research thing. So I used to run design teams. It's part of user research. It's totally valid in user research. What it's used for in user research is to try to figure out how your users interact with your product, what they're thinking at the time. So it's trying to figure out, is your product confusing or not? And like, hey, how do we, make the flow better? What are people thinking in these stages? That's totally fine and totally appropriate. But we are validating startup ideas. I'm not too worried right now with like whether the flow is confusing, right? Like I'm worried about whether this like product should exist in the world or not. Like flow, I'm gonna worry about that later, right? And so I sometimes hear people kind of like talk about, oh yeah, they've been showing mockups and they validated their idea by showing people mockups and stuff. And it's like, well, if you show somebody a mockup, they're gonna be like, oh, I would click this button. But it doesn't get at the real heart of it, which is like, would you use this product on a consistent recurring basis or not, right? I don't care where the button is. So to me, this value is like super low. I think it's testing the complete wrong thing. And the cost is kind of high because you have to go like get designs so that you can show people. So it's the cost of user interviews because you got to go show people, but then you also have to have designs ready to go. So this one is like, I don't do this one ever. I frankly skip this one every single time. I kind of skip surveys every time too, to be honest. I kind of skip mockups every single time. I don't bother with them. Again, I also was a designer. I was like our first designer. So I can do designs by myself and I totally skip this, even though I can do it myself. So not that interesting. Okay. Fake doors, actual usage. These are the two ones that I think are the most useful, obviously. Fake doors, kind of like what we were talking about. I've talked about this quite a lot. Maybe the cost of this should be a little bit higher than mockups, but basically all you need to do is you need to make a website. Nowadays, when I make websites, I'm literally just making them on like Webflow or whatever. If I'm testing multiple ideas, I actually will use the same design across all the different ideas with just like image and text changes. And I run A/B tests on it. So I think fake doors are kind of like how I do it. You just need to make a website, basically. You do sign up through Airtable, so you can completely no code this entire thing, and it's fine. I think the value of this is high, primarily because the first 3 user survey interviews and show mockups are they're a little contrived. like you're asking people to imagine that they're in this situation and would they do this thing. And the fake doors is like, it's in the natural kind of element. They're sitting at home, they saw some ad, or they heard about your website through something else. They clicked on it, they're reading it. They don't know that this isn't a real product. And then you get to see what they do. So it's like a real kind of like experiment. So I like it quite a lot. And then actual usage obviously is the best, but you got to do a little bit more work. But look, I mean, I was running this two-sided marketplace. We have 50K in GMV. Like that's real kind of like validation that, you know, we could kind of do more with this. So there's highest cost here and we kind of like a very high value. Coming back to like how you should think about the ordering of these validation methods. My recommendation is, which is what I do. So I guess that's, you know, that's the highest recommendation you can have. I always start with fake doors. I just make a ton of websites and I figure out how to drive traffic to them. I see what the conversion rate is. People who sign up, then I talk to them in user interviews to like find out more about my users and the problem that they solve and all that kind of stuff. I just don't assume I really understand them very well. So I do a bunch of that. And then I feed the feedback in the user interviews back into the fake door and the website. That's how I decrease the CAC and all that stuff. So I'm building this virtuous like loop of run a fake door, get people to sign up, talk to those people, learn from talking to them, plug them back into the website, see if that increases conversion, and kind of like keep doing this back and forth. And websites are also great because you have to be able to communicate what you're actually building. I think sometimes when I talk to founders, there's like, they have ideas and that's fine. Ideas are totally fine. But having to create a website forces you to like, how do I explain this to a user who has never heard about this before? What are the features? What are the value propositions? Who are they? You have to kind of figure all this stuff out in order to make a website. And so the act of setting up a fake door is actually like very useful in figuring out what your idea actually is, and then being able to show it to other people. And then eventually I do that virtuous cycle enough, and then I kind of graduate into this actual usage part. Again, I think you can do all of this with very little money in a few weeks, and actual usage you could probably do, but definitely fake doors and user interviews you can kind of do in your part-time. I'll talk to you about how to do it, but you can kind of do it that way.